All right, let's take a look at Descartes' argument from perfection. Remember, this is the argument that Descartes used to convince himself that he couldn't be hopelessly possessed by a demon. And therefore, he could trust his mathematical thoughts in particular, like 2 + 3 = 5. And Descartes concluded that because if he could prove that the God of Catholicism, which Descartes was an adherent of, if the God of monotheism actually existed, that God would be all-powerful, that God would be all-knowing, that God would be all-good, and it wouldn't allow Descartes to exist in hopeless possession, right? Because it's all-good, it's all-powerful, and it's all-knowing. So it knows this is going on, it has the ability to stop it, and it would want to because it is all-good. All right, so let's see how this argument works. Premise number 1. A being that doubts is an imperfect being, because a perfect being would have full knowledge, and hence no room for doubt. All right, fair enough. Perfect being has perfect knowledge. Perfect knowledge means there's no room for doubt because you know everything. Premise number 2, I doubt. Therefore, I'm an imperfect being. Okay, if you experience doubt, that means you have gaps in your knowledge. If you have gaps in your knowledge isn't complete, and if it's not complete, it's not perfect. All right, that makes sense. How about premise number 3? Yet I could know that I am perfect only by having the concept of perfection. Therefore, I do have the concept of perfection. Okay. This means that if I have the concept of untrue, I must have first had the concept of true. If I know what the word impossible means, I must have first known what possible means. And Descartes saying, I know what imperfection is, I had to first know what perfection is, though. Okay, so think about that. You follow his reasoning there? Do you agree with it? Premise number 4, I could not have received the concept of perfection from something imperfect. Therefore, my concept was not derived from myself. So Descartes' not perfect. Nothing in the world he experiences is perfect. So he's never had this direct experience of anything that was perfect. So he couldn't have derived this knowledge from himself, which is all he really knows exists as he's thinking about this, or from anything in the world that he might have experienced, although that wouldn't be relevant to this argument. Premise number 5, therefore, my concept of perfection was derived from something that is perfect. And only God is perfect. In fact, God is perfection. So I derived my concept of perfection from God, and therefore God exists. Okay. So we're zeroing in on premises. As I sort of indicated, the first 2 premises seem true. We do experience doubt. We wouldn't experience doubt if we were perfect. Therefore, we must be imperfect. And any being that doubts would be an imperfect being because that means they don't have complete knowledge. Now, what about some of these other premises, particularly 4 and 5? Do you find reasons to doubt those? For example, in premise number 4, it's true that Descartes never had direct experience of anything perfect. No one has. But does that mean that he has to have had perfection derived from something other than himself? Because someone like John Locke or Berkeley might step in here as empiricists and say, Descartes, pal, yes, you've never experienced anything perfect and you're not perfect, but you can probably imaginatively extract the imperfections of all the things you have experienced and then imagine these imperfect things without those imperfections. And that would have resulted in the concept of perfection. Okay, you could even do it with yourself. Imagine that you've always existed, that you will always exist, and that you have complete knowledge. Imagine what you would be like, Descartes, as a perfect being. You can't do that? Because if you can't do that by extracting all the imperfections, you're not really being honest. That's what Locke and Berkeley would say. Okay, so they would blow a hole in premise number 4, and then that would also raise questions about premise number 5.